The war front stretched across the dead world of Altharis like a wound that refused to close, its jagged cities reduced to rubble, its skies thick with the gray ash of endless bombardment. For the soldiers of the Galactic Union, this was yet another campaign against insurgents clinging to a hopeless cause. They were veterans of dozens of wars, armored in technology so advanced it hummed faintly even at rest, their confidence forged from centuries of unbroken dominance. To them, this conflict was routine, another display of overwhelming power to remind lesser species of their place. The soldiers assembled in the staging hall, a cavernous structure carved into the side of a shattered mountain. Plasma rifles glowed faintly as they were inspected. Targeting systems whispered through helmets in streams of data, and the deep voices of Varkon heavy troopers mingled with the insectal chatter of Xyrock tacticians. The Union's best had been called to this planet, and their arrogance was palpable. None doubted the outcome. Then the human walked in. Sergeant Elias Kane appeared almost invisible among them, a figure so unassuming that for a moment no one acknowledged him. He carried no bulky plasma cannon or armored exosuit. Instead, slung across his back was a rifle of unfamiliar design, long and plain, with a wooden stock polished by years of use. His uniform lacked the gleam of Union alloys. His face was weathered, skin marked by sunlight rather than genetic perfection, his eyes gray and sharp beneath the brim of his cap. Laughter erupted before he even spoke a word. A Krovan officer, his carapace shimmering with polished armor, tapped his mandibles together in amusement. They sent us a relic from the fringe? Look at his weapon. Does it burn holes with friction? A hulking Varkon leaned down until his tusked grin nearly brushed Kane's shoulder. Human, that thing wouldn't scratch my plating. Do you intend to scare the enemy to death? Kane offered no retort. He merely adjusted the strap of his rifle and walked past them, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. His silence seemed to inflame their mockery. More comments followed. Questions about whether he would faint at the sound of heavy artillery, whether his species still hunted prey with sharpened sticks, whether his tiny lungs could endure real combat. He ignored each remark with the same steady composure, as though their words never landed. When the briefing began, the contrast between Kane and the others grew sharper. The alien commander, a towering figure with crystalline skin, projected holographic maps across the chamber. Red zones marked insurgent strongholds hidden among collapsed cities. Blue formations indicated Union patrols advancing with mechs and aerial drones. The plan was simple: overwhelm, flush out, and destroy. While the others boasted about the efficiency of their weapons, Kane studied the map with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient's wound. His eyes traced elevation lines, wind patterns, and ruined buildings that offered vantage points. He asked no questions aloud, but his finger tapped softly against the stock of his rifle, measuring distances invisible to anyone else. A Xyrock tactician noticed his focus and sneered. "You search for hiding places? You will be buried in them soon enough." Kane finally spoke, his voice low but cutting. "Hiding places are where battles are decided. Whoever owns the shadows owns the field." The room quieted briefly, not out of respect, but from uncertainty. His words carried a gravity that did not fit the frail figure who had spoken them. Then the laughter returned, louder than before, washing over the silence. The commander ended the noise with a gesture, his crystalline body pulsing with irritation. Dismissed, the soldiers prepared their equipment. Kane moved with deliberate care, checking every piece of his rifle. He measured the scope alignment, adjusted the sling, cleaned the barrel with practiced precision. The aliens found new amusement in his ritual. Their weapons required no such maintenance, their systems self-correcting and flawless. Yet Kane worked as though his survival depended on every detail. One younger soldier, a slender reptilian cadet, hesitated before joining the others. He watched Kane's hands, the way each movement carried the weight of repetition. "Why do you polish it so much?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Kane looked up, meeting his gaze without hostility. Because one speck of dust in the wrong place, one scratch unseen, can mean the difference between hitting and missing. And missing, out there, means someone else dies. The cadet swallowed, unsettled. He hurried away before the others could notice his doubt. When the preparations ended, the soldiers gathered once more at the deployment bay. Engines rumbled above them, dropships ready to carry them into the scarred ruins. The mood was triumphant among the aliens, who sang chants of conquest in their guttural tongues. Kane stood apart, silent, watching the sky through the narrow viewport as though he could already see the battle unfolding. One of the Varkon heavy troopers called out to him over the noise. "What is it you hunt, little human? The enemy or your own death?" Kane slid a single round into the chamber of his rifle with a metallic click that silenced the hall. His answer came evenly, without flourish. "I hunt the moment." The words lingered long after he boarded the dropship. The journey to the battlefield was short, the ride filled with alien voices boasting about kill counts and wagers placed on who would break the enemy lines first. Kane sat apart from them, eyes closed, his breathing steady. He did not look like a warrior preparing for glory, but like a man preparing to wait. When the dropship doors opened, the world outside roared with the sound of distant gunfire and collapsing buildings. The air was acrid, filled with dust that clung to armor and skin alike. Alien soldiers charged forward, weapons flashing, their laughter turning into battle cries. Kane remained behind for a heartbeat, scanning the skyline, tracing invisible arcs with his eyes. He moved into the ruins without fanfare, slipping into the shadows as if they had been waiting for him all along. By the time the others noticed his absence, he was gone, swallowed by the battlefield. The aliens dismissed it as cowardice, another sign of human fragility. Yet somewhere above them, hidden in the jagged skeleton of a broken tower, Kane lay prone with his rifle steady, his finger resting near the trigger, his breath calm as a whisper. The first engagement had not yet begun, but already the hunter had chosen his ground. And in the silence between gunfire and laughter, the war was preparing to change. The ruins of the old city stretched before the squad like a labyrinth of broken towers and collapsed streets, every shadow alive with the promise of an ambush. The alien soldiers advanced in formation, their armor gleaming faintly despite the grime, their rifles charged and humming with lethal energy. Their voices carried through the dust, full of arrogance and impatience. To them, this was a hunt, not a battle, and the prey would be driven into the open soon enough. Kane followed behind, his rifle cradled loosely in his hands, his movements calm, his expression unreadable. The patrol began without incident, the streets eerily quiet. Rubble crunched beneath armored boots, and the occasional gust of wind stirred loose sheets of metal clinging to skeletal buildings. The alien soldiers muttered about the silence, some joking that the insurgents must have already fled in fear. Others speculated that perhaps the human had frightened them off by merely arriving. Their laughter was thin, masking a tension none would admit. Kane said nothing, his eyes scanning the rooftops, windows, and alleys as though each held a secret waiting to be revealed. The ambush came swiftly, shattering the illusion of superiority. From hidden perches and concealed positions, the insurgent struck. Plasma bolts rained down from above, scorching stone and metal alike. The first volley caught 2 Union soldiers in the open, their shields collapsing under concentrated fire. Their screams echoed briefly before being silenced by the collapse of a nearby wall. The formation broke as instinct replaced discipline. Aliens shouted orders over one another, their voices clashing with the shriek of weapons. The insurgents were not a rabble. They moved with practiced coordination, flanking positions, forcing the Union squad into the center of a kill zone. Explosives hidden beneath the rubble detonated, throwing armored bodies into the air. Panic licked at the edges of even the most disciplined warriors. The Union's advanced weaponry, designed for open field dominance, proved clumsy in the cramped alleys. Plasma bolts struck walls, scattering molten fragments, but rarely found their mark. In the chaos, Kane dropped to one knee in the shadow of a ruined archway. His rifle slid into position as though it belonged there. He exhaled once, slowly, and the world seemed still. Amid the cacophony of alien weapons and dying screams, there came a single sharp crack, an alien sound, unfamiliar to the battlefield. A figure collapsed from a rooftop, lifeless before its body struck the ground. The aliens noticed, their panic momentarily disrupted by confusion. They had seen no glowing beam, no crackling discharge, only the instantaneous fall of an enemy whose head was now little more than ruin. Another crack followed, and another insurgent toppled backward, his weapon slipping from nerveless fingers. The Union soldiers froze, turning toward Kane with disbelief. He did not look at them. His world had narrowed to the scope, the rhythm of breath and trigger, the invisible thread between hunter and prey. Each shot found its mark with terrifying precision. An insurgent commander leaning from cover to bark an order crumpled instantly, a hole drilled cleanly through his skull. Another, attempting to rally his comrades, collapsed mid-sentence. The chain of command shattered, and the insurgents hesitated. The aliens began to understand. While their weapons blazed indiscriminately, Kane's fire was surgical. He was not merely killing. He was dismantling the enemy, cutting away their structure and spirit one body at a time. The Krovan officer, once loudest in his mockery, found himself crouching behind a pile of shattered stone, watching through his visor as insurgents fell to an invisible predator. "Impossible," he muttered, though his voice carried the tremor of doubt. "No optics, no trackers. How does he see them?" Another alien soldier, bloodied but alive, whispered back, "He doesn't need machines. He hunts with his own eyes." The fight shifted. Where moments ago the Union squad had been prey, now the insurgents faltered, terrified of exposing themselves. They fired wildly, desperate to locate the source of the silent death cutting them down. But Kane was already moving, sliding into new cover, his shots never betraying his exact position. To the insurgents, death seemed to strike from everywhere at once. The aliens began to recover their courage. With the insurgents' leadership broken, the overwhelming plasma fire of the Union found its place again. Heavy troopers pushed forward, shields raised, while lighter soldiers swept alleys with suppressive fire. The insurgents, once disciplined, scattered into retreat. The ambush unraveled, bodies littering the streets where precision had done what brute force could not. When the last insurgent fell silent, the city seemed to breathe again. Smoke drifted between broken walls, the smell of scorched stone mixing with blood. The aliens gathered, shaken but alive. Some bore wounds, armor scorched and cracked, but most still stood. They looked to Kane, who calmly ejected a spent casing and slid another round into place before lowering his rifle. His expression had not changed. For the first time, silence greeted him. No laughter, no mockery, only a heavy recognition of what they had witnessed. The Varkhan who had sneered at his weapon earlier approached slowly, his massive frame seeming smaller now. Those shots, they should be impossible. No system could track like that. No weapon fires so quietly. Kane wiped a smear of dust from his scope and answered without arrogance. "It isn't the weapon. It's the patience to wait, the discipline to breathe, and the will to see." The words unsettled them more than the shots themselves. They had been raised in a culture where power meant towering machines and overwhelming firepower. Yet this fragile human had turned the tide of battle with nothing but silence, timing, and unshakable focus. The Krovan officer clicked his mandibles uneasily. "You fight like a ghost." Kane gave the faintest shrug. "Ghosts don't miss." The squad moved on, their formation tighter now, their voices subdued. The battlefield felt different, as though the shadows themselves carried his presence. Every soldier knew that without him, they would have been slaughtered. Some whispered that perhaps the stories of human cunning were true, that their fragility was only a mask for something more dangerous. Kane walked at the rear again, his rifle resting easily against his shoulder. He did not speak further. His gaze roamed constantly, reading the terrain, listening to the wind shift through hollow structures. The others glanced back at him more often than before, their earlier scorn replaced by wary respect. The patrol ended with no further contact, though every soldier felt the weight of what had passed. At the extraction point, as dropships descended through the haze, the aliens looked at Kane not as a liability, but as something they could not yet define. He boarded without ceremony, settling into the same quiet position as before, while the others avoided their old jokes. The city lay smoldering behind them, insurgents broken and scattered. Yet the true shift had occurred not in the ruins, but within the squad itself. For the first time, they had glimpsed the power of a human weapon they had never considered. Patience sharpened into precision, silence turned into death. And though none dared say it aloud, they knew this was only the beginning. The aftermath of the ambush lingered like a bitter taste in the alien soldiers' mouths. They had survived, but only because of the human they had ridiculed. The silence in the dropship as it carried them back to base was more telling than any admission of gratitude. Eyes that once mocked Kane now studied him with unease, as though trying to decipher whether he was flesh and blood or something more spectral. He sat apart, rifle resting against his knees, hands steady even after the violence, his breathing measured, his gaze lost in the distance. At the forward base, the squad disembarked into the cavernous hangar. Technicians swarmed around damaged armor and scorched equipment. Officers demanded after-action reports. Yet amidst the routine chaos, a hush followed Kane wherever he went. The alien soldiers who had once joked about his fragility now lowered their voices when he passed. A few attempted to dismiss his marksmanship as luck, but the certainty of his kills, each placed with uncanny precision, gnawed at their excuses. In the barracks, the tension boiled into whispered arguments. "He doesn't fight like us," one soldier muttered. "He waits, then strikes. There is no honor in hiding." "Honor," another snapped back. "Would you prefer we had all died so you could keep your pride? He saved us." The discussion fractured the squad. Some resented the implication that their weapons and strength were inferior. Others, shaken by their brush with death, clung to the belief that the humans' strange skills were the only reason they had returned alive. Kane remained indifferent to their debates, cleaning his rifle with the same meticulous precision, each movement deliberate and ritualistic. When the next mission briefing came, the commander's crystalline body pulsed with faint irritation. The insurgents had withdrawn into the dense forest beyond the ruins, territory where Union mechs could not maneuver and drones faltered. The squad was ordered to pursue, root out hidden cells, and secure the area. It was a task the Union forces dreaded, close quarters fighting in terrain that negated their technological advantages. Kane listened in silence, his expression betraying nothing. The march into the forest was tense. Towering trees rose like pillars of stone, their thick canopies blotting out much of the sky. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and decay. Visibility was poor, and every rustle seemed to promise an ambush. Alien soldiers advanced nervously, their armor glinting dully in the muted light, their rifles raised but uncertain. Kane moved differently. He blended with the forest, his steps soundless, his profile merging with the shadows. At times he seemed to vanish entirely, only to reappear further ahead, crouched low, scanning with an intensity that made the others uneasy. They followed the path noisily, their heavy boots cracking branches, their weapons humming like beacons, while he slipped between trees as though the forest itself had granted him passage. The first contact came at dusk. Insurgents, hidden among twisted roots and elevated platforms, opened fire. Plasma bolts lit the gloom with bursts of emerald light, forcing the aliens into defensive positions. Their return fire blazed, but again it proved clumsy in the dense terrain. Branches exploded, bark scorched, yet the enemy remained concealed. Panic threatened to take hold, the memory of the city ambush fresh in their minds. Then came the crack of Kane's rifle, sharp and distinct against the muffled forest air. One insurgent fell from his perch, tumbling lifeless through branches. Another collapsed into the undergrowth, weapon clattering uselessly. The alien soldiers flinched, then steadied, their fear tempered by recognition. They had heard this sound before, had seen what it meant. Kane had begun his work. Through the fight, Kane remained unseen by both enemy and ally. His shots came from shifting positions, never twice from the same place. To the insurgents, it was as though the forest itself had turned hostile, delivering death without warning. Commanders fell silent mid-order. Marksmen dropped before they could steady their aim, and each carefully chosen target unraveled the cohesion of the ambush. The aliens watched in awe and disquiet. They advanced more boldly now, their weapons cutting through the disoriented insurgents. Yet they could not shake the awareness that their survival hinged on the invisible presence of one man. The Krovan officer, who had once jeered at Kane's weapon, found himself scanning the treeline not for enemies, but for the faint sign of the human. Each time a crack sounded, his mandibles clicked nervously, part admiration, part dread. When the skirmish ended, the forest fell silent except for the hum of cooling plasma rifles. Corpses lay scattered, insurgent weapons abandoned among roots and stones. The aliens regrouped, panting, their armor scorched and scratched but alive. Kane appeared from the shadows, emerging as quietly as he had vanished. His expression remained the same, calm, focused, unshaken. He checked his rifle, slid a new round into place, and nodded once, as if confirming the hunt was not yet finished. Later that night, as the squad rested in a temporary camp, an alien commander approached Kane. His crystalline skin shimmered faintly in the firelight, reflecting every flicker of flame. He studied the human for a long moment before speaking. "You do not fight as we do. You do not overwhelm. You dismantle." Kane kept his eyes on the fire. Overwhelm is waste. A single cut in the right place can bleed an army dry. You don't need to face every soldier, just the ones who hold the line together. The commander frowned, unsettled. You kill their leaders first. Their voices. That is why they crumble. Kane finally looked at him, his gaze sharp and unyielding. Take the head, the body stumbles. Break the will, the fight dies. War isn't about who has the biggest gun. It's about who sees first, who waits longest, who decides when the moment comes. The words lodged deep, unsettling the commander more than he wished to admit. The others, listening quietly around the fire, shifted uncomfortably. They had believed war to be measured in firepower and technology. Yet here was proof that patience and precision, things they had dismissed as weakness, could bend a battlefield. As dawn approached, the squad moved out again, following Kane's silent guidance through the forest. Their steps were quieter now, their voices hushed, as though they feared breaking the fragile aura surrounding him. Each alien soldier felt it, the creeping realization that the human among them was more dangerous than their entire arsenal. By the time they reached the far side of the forest, the insurgents had retreated deeper into the hills. The squad was bloodied but intact, the mission technically a success. Yet victory no longer felt like their own. It belonged to the man who hunted from shadows, who struck with patience rather than fury. As they prepared to advance toward the mountains, a hush settled over the squad. No one mocked the human anymore. No one doubted his place. Instead, they carried a quiet fear that grew with every step. If such power could be wielded by one man, what might an entire force of humans do? Kane walked at the front this time, his rifle across his chest, his gaze fixed on the ridgeline where their next battle waited. Behind him, the soldiers followed, their arrogance gone, their pride tempered by unease. The forest had taught them what the city had begun to reveal. Elias Kane was not a liability, nor a curiosity. He was a weapon they did not understand, one that had already begun to reshape the war. The hills rose ahead like jagged teeth, scarred by bombardments and riddled with the entrenched defenses of the insurgents. Intelligence claimed this was their last stronghold, the nerve center from which raids and ambushes were coordinated. For the Union soldiers, this was the decisive push a final chance to assert dominance. Yet beneath their duty-driven bravado lay unease, a growing awareness that without the human among them, victory might slip through their fingers. Kane led their ascent, his boots pressing softly into the dirt, his rifle slung in its habitual place, his expression composed but distant, as though he carried the battle already in his mind. The climb was grueling. Smoke from prior bombardments clung to the air, and every ridge threatened an ambush. Alien soldiers marched with weapons raised, scanning endlessly, but their movements lacked confidence. They no longer boasted, no longer filled the silence with laughter. Instead, their eyes flicked often toward Kane, searching him for cues. His gaze swept the terrain methodically, measuring distances, mapping paths. When he paused, so did they, unconsciously falling into his rhythm. His silence had become their anchor. At the summit, the enemy revealed itself. Trenches and barricades cut into the hillside, reinforced bunkers overlooking narrow approaches. The moment the Union squad crested the rise, a storm of plasma, fire poured down. The ground erupted with explosions, dirt and metal flung into the air, the shriek of energy tearing through the atmosphere. The alien soldiers hit the ground, shields flaring desperately under the onslaught. Their counterfire lit the slope, but the insurgents were dug in, their positions hardened, their discipline unwavering. For the first time, even Kane's squad doubted survival. Pinned beneath the barrage, panic threatened to unravel them. One soldier shouted for retreat. Another screamed that the ridge was a slaughterhouse. Amid the chaos, Kane crawled forward, pressing his body against the earth until he found a shallow depression with line of sight. He slid his rifle into place, his movements unhurried despite the storm. His breathing steadied. The world shrank to the circle of his scope. The first shot cracked, sharp and final. An insurgent gunner toppled backward from a nest of sandbags, his heavy weapon falling silent. A second shot followed, tearing through the skull of an officer signaling orders. The barrage faltered as confusion rippled through the defenses. Kane's cadence was relentless yet patient, each shot timed to silence a voice, to erase a leader, to cut away the spine of the resistance. The aliens lifted their heads from cover, astonished once more by the transformation of the battlefield. Their overwhelming firepower, so ineffective moments ago, now found purchase against an enemy shaken by invisible death. They pressed forward, advancing cautiously up the slope while Kane's rifle sang its steady rhythm. Each crack of his weapon cleared a path, turning once impregnable defenses into fractured lines. Insurgents tried to locate him, firing blindly toward ridges and shadows. Explosions shook the earth around Kane's perch, yet he never flinched. His rifle shifted with the precision of a clockwork mechanism, his finger squeezing only when breath and heartbeat aligned. To the insurgents, it seemed the hillside itself had become cursed, every exposed leader struck down by a phantom. The Krovan officer, watching between bursts of his plasma rifle, felt his earlier scorn dissolve into awe. He breaks them without touching their walls, he muttered. The Varkon beside him, tusked and scarred, nodded grimly. He doesn't fight the battle. He decides it. As the insurgent line collapsed, the Union soldiers surged forward, sweeping trenches with lethal efficiency. Kane moved behind them, not rushing, but advancing step by step, always searching for the next moment to cut. His presence guided the momentum, unseen yet undeniable. The enemy, deprived of command, faltered and scattered. By the time the squad reached the heart of the stronghold, resistance had broken. Smoke clung to the air, bodies lay strewn across bunkers, and silence settled over the battlefield. The aliens stood amidst the ruins, their armor scorched, their breathing ragged, but alive. They turned toward Kane, who emerged from cover as calmly as if he had been walking through a quiet meadow. He ejected a spent casing, checked his chamber, and slung the rifle over his shoulder. His expression remained unchanged. No triumph, no pride, only the quiet certainty of a man who had done what he came to do. The Krovan approached, his mandibles clattering softly, not in mockery, but in respect. Without you, we would not stand here. Your weapon, your patience, it is unlike anything we know. You are not what we believed a human to be. Kane met his gaze evenly. You believed strength was enough. It never is. Strength shouts. Patience whispers until the shouting stops. The words carried through the squad, sinking into each soldier's mind. They had seen entire battalions crushed despite their technology, their armor, their overwhelming numbers. Yet one man with a simple rifle had reshaped the tide. For the first time, they understood why humanity, small and fragile, had survived in a galaxy of giants. That night, as the squad set camp among the broken trenches, they did not mock him. They did not jeer at his weapon or his form. They spoke instead in hushed tones, sharing what they had seen. The insurgents' fear, the silence that preceded each shot, the collapse of an army led by unseen hands. Kane sat apart as always, cleaning his rifle, eyes distant. The firelight gleamed on the polished wood of his stock, and the aliens found themselves staring not at a relic, but at a symbol. Somewhere in the darkness, whispers began. The insurgents who fled spoke of a ghost who killed without being seen, a predator of shadows whose bullets carried certainty. Among the Union soldiers, the same whispers took root. They did not call him human anymore. They called him something older, something colder. A hunter, a specter, a reminder that war was not the dominion of technology, but of will. As dawn approached, the commander received new orders. The insurgency was broken, but remnants had scattered into the wastelands. Pursuit would be necessary. The aliens prepared with renewed energy, their armor repaired, their weapons recharged. Yet their eyes drifted again and again to Kane, as though awaiting his silent judgment. He offered no speech, no instruction, only the steady rhythm of his preparation. It was enough. When the squad marched once more into the wilds, there was no laughter. No one mocked the human. No one questioned his place. They followed him not by command, but by instinct, as though they had accepted a truth too profound to deny. Elias Kane walked ahead, the rifle across his chest, his gaze fixed on horizons unseen. Behind him, the finest soldiers of the Galactic Union moved with uncharacteristic humility, their arrogance tempered into something sharper. The war had not ended, but something deeper had shifted. Where once they had mocked, they now carried reverence. Where once they saw weakness, they now saw the quiet edge of a blade too sharp to grasp. Kane had not asked for it, yet he had become their shadow, their unspoken guide, the ghost that turned fear into silence. And as the wind swept across the battlefield, carrying the stench of smoke and death, the alien soldiers realized they would never again laugh at the fragility of a human. For in that fragility lay the most dangerous weapon they had ever known.